It was just another quiet evening at home until the phone call came and turned our world upside down. Marcus and I were sitting at the dinner table, enjoying the salmon and roasted potatoes I'd made, when his cell phone started buzzing. He glanced at the screen and froze. "Who is it?" I asked. "It's Selena," he said grimly. Selena, his 19-year-old daughter from his disastrous first marriage who he hadn't spoken to in years. My heart sank. Nothing good could come of this. Marcus answered the call and I studied his face as he listened, his eyes narrowing in concern. After a few terse words, he hung up and let out a long sigh. "What did she want?" I asked, bracing myself. "She's coming to live with us. Her roommate kicked her out, so she's driving here tomorrow." I dropped my fork, my appetite vanishing. Here? For how long? She didn't say, but it sounded like she plans to stay indefinitely. I felt the panic rising in my chest. We'd worked so hard to build a good life, a stable home. Marcus and I both came from broken families, rife with lies and betrayals. It had taken years of therapy and trust-building to heal those wounds. The last thing we needed was a destructive, entitled 19-year-old tearing open those scars again. "Can't her mother take her in?" I asked. Marcus shook his head. "You know how that went. The divorce was nuclear. They haven't spoken since." Before I could object further, we heard the front door open. Our 16-year-old son Eli walked in, home from basketball practice. He joined us at the table, his wavy brown hair damp with sweat. "Hey, Mom, Dad, what's going on?" he asked, detecting the tension immediately. He was an exceptionally perceptive kid. Marcus gave him a tired smile. "We just got a call from your sister Selena. She's going to be staying with us for a while." Eli's eyes widened in surprise. He knew little about Selena, other than the few bitter stories Marcus had told over the years. Okay, Eli said slowly. "How long is she staying?" "We don't know yet," Marcus admitted. An uneasy silence settled on the room. I could imagine the worried thoughts spinning through Eli's mind. Selena's sudden arrival would disrupt the stability he valued so deeply, but he was too kind-hearted to voice those concerns. I reached over and gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. Then I turned to Marcus, my eyes flashing with determination. "We need to set firm ground rules," I said. "No freeloading or taking advantage. If she wants to stay here, she needs to get a job and contribute." Marcus nodded. "You're right. I'll make that clear when she arrives." But as we cleaned up the remains of dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing good would come from Selena's return. The past has a way of catching up, even if you barricade the door. The next morning I woke up feeling uneasy. Today was the day Selena would arrive. Marcus had cleared out the small guest room for her, but I doubted she'd be happy with the cramped space. Over breakfast, Marcus tried reassuring Eli. "Don't worry, I'm sure Selena has grown up a lot since I last saw her. Just try to make her feel welcome." Eli nodded, but I could tell he was dreading her arrival as much as I was. Around noon, we heard a car pull up outside. "That must be her," Marcus said. My heart pounded as we went to the front door. A blonde girl stepped out of a beat-up hatchback jammed with clothes and boxes. She looked nothing like the sullen, scrawny 13-year-old I remembered from the divorce hearings years ago. She'd grown tall and pretty, wearing stylish clothes and expertly applied makeup. But her bright smile didn't reach her eyes. Marcus hugged her awkwardly. "Welcome home, Selena." "Thanks, Daddy," she said sweetly, though she'd made no effort to contact him since the divorce. "It's so good to see you again." Over the next hour, Selena carried in her boxes and bags, piling them in the small guest room despite the lack of space. She rejected Marcus's offers to help, barking at him not to touch her things. So much for her growing up, I thought. At dinner, Selena dominated the conversation, chatting about herself and sprinkling in subtle insults toward me. "I can't believe you're still working as a nurse, Lena. Wouldn't you rather do something more interesting?" I bit my tongue. Nursing was my passion, but Selena clearly looked down on it. When Eli talked about applying for college scholarships, Selena laughed sharply. "Good luck getting enough money to attend a decent school." Eli's face burned. I knew how hard he'd worked for those scholarships, maintaining straight A's while excelling at sports. After dinner, I pulled Marcus aside. "We need to set ground rules for Selena," I urged. "No more of this entitled behavior." He sighed. "You're right, I'll talk to her." But over the next few days, nothing changed. Selena continued acting rudely, while doing nothing to get a job or help around the house. My patience wore dangerously thin. Then came the final straw. I arrived home from work one evening to find Selena gone and Eli sitting alone, his face pale. "What's wrong?" I asked. "She stole my laptop, and my money jar was empty." His lower lip trembled. "There was over $500 in there from my job." Rage boiled inside me. That money represented years of Eli's hard work and sacrifice. When Selena finally swanned in, I confronted her. "Give back Eli's money and his laptop now." She smirked. "Or what? You'll kick me out." I wanted to slap that smug look off her face. But violence wouldn't solve anything. Selena was toxic, destroying all she touched. I had to protect my family from her, even if it meant driving away Marcus's daughter for good. I decided right then and there. Selena had to go. Her toxic behavior was destroying our family, and I refused to let that continue. When Marcus came home, I told him what Selena had done. She stole from her own brother after we opened our home to her. "I want her out, Marcus. Today." He looked pained. "I know Selena's behavior is unacceptable, but she's still my daughter. If we kick her out now, she'll have nowhere to go." "So we just let her keep stealing from us?" I cried. "She's manipulating you. Can't you see that?" "Give me a little more time to work things out with her," Marcus pleaded. "With some boundaries, I think Selena can change." I shook my head in frustration. Marcus's parental guilt was blinding him to Selena's true nature. But I had to pick my battles carefully to avoid damaging my marriage. "1 week," I said. "If her behavior doesn't improve drastically in 1 week, she has to leave." Marcus agreed reluctantly. I only hoped we could limit the damage Selena inflicted before then. But over the next few days, things only got worse. Selena stayed out partying all night, then slept past noon. She helped herself to my jewelry, claimed they were just loans. When I demanded she get a job, she scoffed. "Why work when Daddy lets me stay here for free?" One night, I came home to find her smoking on the couch. When I yelled at her to take it outside, she blew smoke in my face. "You're not my mother. Don't tell me what to do." I felt sick, realizing the extent of Selena's manipulation. She knew exactly how to provoke me while acting sweetly innocent around Marcus. The final straw came when I received a call from my credit card company, asking about a suspicious purchase. Over $2,000 at a luxury clothing store in LA. It didn't take a genius to realize Selena had stolen my card. She'd racked up more debt in a week than Eli and I spent on food in a month. When Marcus came home, I confronted him, shaking with rage. "Your daughter is destroying us. I want her out of this house tonight." Marcus's face was haggard. "You're right." I wanted to believe Selena could change, but clearly she's out of control. "It's me or her, Marcus," I said quietly. "Choose carefully." He pulled me into a hug. "You and Eli will always come first. I just pray we can get through this without tearing our family apart." We sat down with Selena, and Marcus told her she had to move out immediately. She flew into a rage, hurling insults and accusations. I stayed silent, letting Marcus handle his deranged daughter. When Selena stomped off to pack her things, Marcus put his head in his hands. "I'm so sorry I brought this madness into our home," he said. "You and Eli mean everything to me. However long it takes, I promise we'll recover from Selena's poison." I squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his words. With unity, we would survive this trial. Selena's twisted schemes could not break our family. The weeks after kicking out Selena were tense. Marcus tried calling her several times, but she refused to speak with him. I knew he was torn up with guilt, blaming himself for how she'd turned out. I tried reassuring him we'd done the right thing. Selena was like a tornado, destroying all in her path. We changed the locks and canceled my stolen credit card. The bank's fraud department was understanding, agreeing to waive the bogus charges. Slowly, our lives regained a sense of normalcy. Then the letter came, shattering that fragile peace all over again. It was from a bank I'd never heard of, thanking me for opening a new credit account. My breath caught in my throat as I read the attached paperwork. Someone had applied for a personal loan in my name, forging my signature on the forms. $15,000 already deposited into an unknown account. My hands shook with anger and panic. That amount of debt could devastate our family, and there was only one person who would stoop so low. When Marcus came home, I thrust the letter at him. "Your daughter is trying to destroy us. We need to call the police." His eyes widened in shock as he read the letter. My God, I know Selena has issues, but outright identity theft? He slumped at the table, head in his hands. This is all my fault. I failed her as a father. My anger thawed slightly. As much as Selena infuriated me, I knew this betrayal devastated Marcus even more. I sat down beside him. You did your best with her under terrible circumstances. Some people just refuse to change. But now we need to focus on protecting ourselves and Eli. Will you call the police to report the fraud? Marcus sighed heavily, but nodded. You're right. I need to do the responsible thing, no matter how painful. We spent an agonizing hour on the phone with the police and bank, filing reports about Selena's crime. It still boggled my mind that the smiling little girl I remembered from Marcus's wedding photos could grow into this heartless criminal. The bank investigator informed us the loan had been taken out locally, meaning Selena was still lurking nearby. The thought made my skin crawl. That night, as we lay in bed, I turned to Marcus. We'll get that loan invalidated. The bank believes we're the victims here. I hope you're right, he said. Because if not, this could financially devastate us. We could even lose the house. The unspoken fear hung heavy between us. Selena wasn't content just poisoning her father's memory of her. She aimed to completely destroy his new family, no matter the cost. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I repeated a silent mantra. Selena's scheming couldn't touch us, no matter how hard she tried. Goodness and truth would prevail. But in my heart, I harbored a cold anger I'd never felt before. If Selena continued threatening my loved ones, I would stop at nothing to take her down. Over the next few weeks, we heard nothing from Selena. The bank was investigating the fraudulent loan, buying us time before the debts came due. The police had tried visiting Selena's last known address, but she'd already vacated her apartment, leaving no trace. Marcus spent hours scouring online records, trying to find where Selena had disappeared to, but it seemed she knew how to avoid being caught, a true con artist. Then on a sunny Saturday, everything changed again. Marcus was at a weekend teaching conference, so Eli and I decided to see a movie together. But when we returned home, I instantly sensed something was wrong. The front door was ajar. My pulse pounded as I rushed inside. Eli closed behind. Wait in the hall, I told him. If Selena was lurking inside, I didn't want Eli getting hurt. I crept forward, peering into the darkened rooms. At first, nothing seemed disturbed. Then I reached Eli's bedroom. The entire room had been ransacked. Dresser drawers flung open, mattress upended, closet ransacked. Eli rushed in behind me, crying out in shock. That's when I saw the paper on his bed, scrawled with a taunting message, "College fund gone. Oops, better start bussing tables, loser brother." Red spots swam before my eyes. The college fund Marcus and I had painstakingly built for Eli, untouched until now nearly $20,000 for his future, was gone. Stolen by Selena to fund her extravagant tastes, while she left crude insults for the brother she'd never bothered to know. I heard a strangled sob behind me. Eli's face was white, eyes glittering with tears. All that money you saved for me, gone. I wrapped my arms around my kind, diligent son, so undeserving of this cruelty. We'll figure this out, I promised. But inside, my blood boiled. That money was meant to give Eli a chance at a better life. And Selena had snatched that dream away without a second thought. When Marcus arrived, he broke down at the violation of our home and Eli's loss. I rarely saw my soft-spoken husband enraged, but today his fury mirrored my own. Our savings drained, our locks picked, our son senselessly tormented. Enough was enough. Selena had to face consequences before she destroyed more innocent lives. The next evening, ignoring Marcus's warnings, I drove to the rundown motel where Selena was rumored to be staying. Sure enough, I spotted her beat-up hatchback out front. I banged on her door until she finally opened it, smirking when she saw me. Well, if it isn't St. Lena, come to preach about morality? I slapped her across the face. You absolute monster, I spat. Wasn't ruining our lives once enough for you? Selena's grin vanished. You'll regret that, Butch, she hissed, lunging toward me. We scuffled briefly before I shoved her back inside, slamming the door in her contorted face. I strode away, trembling but resolute. One way or another, Selena's reign of terror ended today. I had given her every chance to change. But some people rotted from the inside out, beyond hope of redemption. Dragging them from the darkness risked them pulling you down into their depths. Selena had proven herself a soulless parasite, incapable of goodness. Now it was time to excise her from our lives for good, before her fangs struck again. In the weeks after my confrontation with Selena, I waited on edge for her retaliation. Marcus increased security around our home. I pulled Eli from school, not wanting him alone until Selena was apprehended. But as days passed with no sign of her, we began to breathe easier. Maybe she had realized her crimes would catch up with her if she stayed in town. Then, late one night, I awoke to blaring fire alarms. Marcus and I rushed to Eli's room and found it filled with smoke, flames licking up one wall. We grabbed Eli and raced outside, moments before the fire engulfed his bedroom. As firefighters extinguished the blaze, suspicion gnawed at me. This was no electrical mishap. Selena had made her final, desperate play for revenge. The police investigation confirmed my fears. Traces of gasoline had been splashed along one side of the house and ignited. A disturbing amount, enough to incinerate us as we slept if the timing had been slightly off. Marcus's face was haggard as he spoke to the investigators. My daughter Selena Rogers is your arson suspect. We have evidence she committed identity theft and burglary against us. This fire was her latest attempt to harm my family. With the troubling revelations about Selena's escalating crimes, the police finally took serious action. They obtained security footage from nearby cameras showing a figure in Selena's car fleeing the neighborhood right before firefighters arrived. Arrest warrants were issued. Selena's name and photo were distributed to local media, labeling her an armed and dangerous fugitive. Marcus even made a direct plea for Selena to turn herself in, promising she'd still receive due process. But Selena remained in hiding, our lives frozen in limbo as we waited for the snake to strike again. I stayed locked indoors with Eli, rifles and fire extinguishers within reach. She'd taken so much from us already. I refused to let her steal our sanity, too. Then late one evening, I got an unexpected call from the lead detective on our case, his voice urgent. You need to check the news right away. Selena Rogers was just apprehended. I grabbed Marcus and Eli, and we turned on the TV with trembling hands. A breaking news report showed Selena in handcuffs outside a pawn shop, stolen jewelry and electronics scattered at her feet. The very items she'd looted from our home. She cursed and spat at reporters as police stuffed her in a squad car. Selena had grown so convinced of her own invincibility that she'd slipped up and gotten caught red-handed. As the reporters recounted Selena's shocking crimes against her own family, her reputation lay in tatters, the real monster exposed underneath the pretty surface. I almost pitied her. Almost. That night, with Selena in a cell and our home protected, we finally slept in peace. The next weeks would be difficult, untangling the wreckage Selena left behind. But the storm had passed. Her lies could haunt us no more. A new dawn had broken, full of promise and hope. In the weeks after Selena's arrest, we slowly regained a sense of normalcy. With Selena locked up on multiple felony charges, the dark cloud that had choked our home finally lifted. I took Eli out for belated birthday celebrations at his favorite restaurants. Marcus and I spent evenings reminiscing about happier times before Selena's arrival. We started making plans to repair the fire damage and replenish our drained finances. There were still court dates looming. Marcus agonized over having to testify against his eldest daughter, no matter how estranged they'd become. I tried to steel my heart, reminding myself of all the suffering Selena had inflicted. Then we received shocking news. While in jail awaiting her trial, Selena had gotten into a violent fight with another inmate. The details were murky, but the results were clear. Selena was dead. Marcus took the news hardest of all. He locked himself in our room for days, torn apart with guilt. I focused my energy on comforting Eli, who despite everything felt saddened at the loss of a sister he'd never known. In the weeks that followed, we learned more disturbing details about Selena's final days. The inmate she'd clashed with claimed Selena had bragged about the rush she got from deceiving people, saying she wished she'd stolen triple the amount from us. Hearing Selena's callous words helped harden my heart. She'd felt no remorse for destroying lives. In the end, her greed and aggression had collided with someone equally vicious. With Selena gone, the case against her unraveled quickly. The bank rescinded her bogus loan applications, removing that crushing debt burden. The police helped retrieve some of our stolen funds from her apartment and storage unit. At the same time, sympathies poured in from our community, people horrified at Selena's behavior once her crimes became public. Many had known Marcus and I as a loving couple and parents for over a decade. They rallied around us, raising money to help Eli pay his college tuition. Their generosity stunned me. After writhing in Selena's web of isolation and deceit, the support of true friends felt like waking up from a nightmare. I saw it dawn on Marcus, too. We were not alone. Good people could conquer evil together. On the anniversary of Selena's death, we visited her grave for the first and only time. Marcus knelt by the modest stone and whispered a prayer. I stood back with Eli, giving them space. She wasn't born bad, Eli said quietly. Do you think if she'd made different choices, she could have been happy? I hugged my wise son close. I think we all forge our own path. Selena chose destruction, but life marches on. Now we walk in the light again. Marcus joined us, finally looking at peace. He took my hand, a gentle smile on his face. Thank you for staying by my side, he said. Your love guided me out of the darkness. Together, we turned and walked into the sunset, leaving Selena's tempestuous ghost behind. The future awaited, bright and full of hope. In the months after Selena's death, our family slowly healed. The fire damage was repaired, stolen money recovered, debts settled. Bit by bit, we reclaimed what Selena had tried destroying. But some wounds aren't visible. I woke choking from nightmares of flames engulfing our home. Marcus withdrew into himself for days at a time, brooding with guilt, and Eli became quieter, jumping at small noises and keeping his bedroom door locked. So I suggested we start seeing a family counselor. At first, Marcus resisted, ashamed at needing help, but eventually he agreed it was necessary to fully mend our battered spirits. Our sessions proved intensely cathartic. We spoke of betrayal, violation, anger. The counselor taught us coping techniques for anxiety and PTSD. He urged us to vocalize our feelings rather than bottling them up, which had strained my relationship with the brooding Marcus. I discovered depths of pain in Marcus I'd never realized. He admitted part of his desperation to help Selena stemmed from regret over his failures with her as a child during his divorce. The counselor eased his shame, reframing his efforts as misguided rather than malicious. For Eli, the greatest solace came from restoring normal routines. He rejoined school sports teams, volunteered at a homeless shelter, and took a part-time job at an ice cream parlor. Focusing on productivity and community engagement helped alleviate his sense of helplessness. 6 months later, with our counselor's approval, we decided to close the book on our tribulations with Selena. We used the last of her recovered stolen money to take a family trip to Hawaii, visiting breathtaking beaches and eating decadent dinners. No friction, no drama, just joyful quality time together. On the final night, Marcus and I renewed our vows on the beach under a sunset, Eli proudly officiating. I gazed lovingly at my two men, my champions. Selena had tried tearing us apart. Instead, we'd emerged stronger than ever. Not all scars fully disappear, but you can choose to wear them proudly, refusing to let past pain define you. Our family embodied that resilience. On the plane ride home, I penned a journal entry I later shared with Marcus and Eli. The past year contained agonizing trials, but also profound growth. We cling closer now, wounds healed into wisdom. Selena acted as a wicked knife, slicing open old injuries and inflicting new ones. But we three are the stitching, holding fast, binding up the cuts, making whole what was rent. Our imperfect family will not just survive, but thrive. The darkness recedes, healing dawns, and the light everlasting remains. Later that week, I tucked my journal away in a keepsake box. The final remnants of Selena's ruination, trial transcripts, bank statements, police reports, went into the trash for good. Marcus hugged me close. It's finally over, he said. Now we build something beautiful from the ashes. I smiled up at my husband, then pulled Eli into our embrace. The storm had passed, our lives stretched ahead, sunny and bright, and we would walk this new path arm in arm, faces tilted toward the light.
Oh, my fault. I barely managed to speak, merely echoing mother-in-law Arya's words. That's exactly what I mean. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened. I do not acknowledge you as Noel's wife. You're not suitable, that's what I mean. Why? Why all of a sudden? Why say such things? It's a problem that you've lied this long without understanding such things. Realize it. It's true what they say. Children from low-level single-parent homes have issues. Seeing you has only reinforced that belief. My name is Sierra. I'm a 35-year-old office worker living with my husband and elementary school-age child, a family of 3 since the beginning of my marriage. We've lived close to my husband Noel's family home, maintaining a good relationship while keeping a comfortable distance. The turning point in our relationship with father-in-law and Arya came a few years ago. They always cared for us, and we were grateful. But father-in-law passed away after a long illness. Arya's grief at losing father-in-law was painfully evident to me at that time. Considering Noel's commute, we planned to move. But seeing Arya's condition made leaving her alone worrisome. Noel and I discussed it many times, and we decided to stay put until Arya's situation stabilized. That's when it started, slowly but surely. Arya began to overstep our personal space. When father-in-law was alive, Arya never visited our home unnecessarily. She never came unannounced, not as far as I knew, but now she suddenly started showing up without any notice. It began as a day or two, but recently she's at our house half the week. If only she gave prior notice, I could bear it. But entertaining Arya when she's so unpleasant is disheartening, especially since she only brings unpleasant conversations. Sierra, you're always home late, aren't you? Are you that busy with work? Are you taking proper care of Noel? What exactly do you mean by proper care? Just what I said. Are you serving nutritious meals and looking after his health? Noel is the pillar of our family, my precious son. Sierra, you're not just serving him frozen meals and hot deli food because you're short on time, are you? She glanced at the freezer. Well, not always, but sometimes, yes. Noel tells me not to overdo it too. Really? But just because you discussed it with Noel doesn't mean you can neglect proper meals. It's just laziness. You should be able to manage that, considering Noel's health. What are your thoughts on this? Every time I tried to speak, Arya's tone grew harsher. I'm sorry, Arya. I try, but it's hard to find the time. That's just laziness. I've worked for many years. I understand the difficulties of working women. But despite that, I've overcome and provided healthy meals and maintained our household for my husband and Noel. From my experience, not having time is just an excuse. Stop making excuses, Sierra. Show some responsibility as a homemaker in charge of your family's health. I can't rest easy otherwise. Arya, a longtime middle school teacher, always judges everything by her standards without considering others. Since a minor incident in middle school due to my family background, I've had a poor impression of teachers, including Arya, a former teacher. I understand Arya cares about our family in her way. That's why I can't say anything and just listen during her lectures. But maybe my attitude seemed unreliable as Arya's behavior gradually changed. Before, she used to come unannounced to lecture or make snide remarks. But lately, she started bringing homemade meals, always in such large quantities that our family couldn't finish in one go, mostly Noel's favorites. At first, I thanked her for her efforts. Encouraged by this, Arya began bringing food daily. Sierra, I understand you're busy, but can't you come home earlier? The meals I prepare get cold because I can't get them inside. I want Noel to eat them while they're hot. I'm sorry. I do want to come home early, but it's just a busy period at work right now. But you say that yet, isn't it? Just that you're not good at your job? I heard on TV recently that people who are good at their jobs manage to leave on time. On the contrary, those who aren't good stay late and work overtime. It's like they were talking about you, Sierra. Aren't you, in fact, not good at your job? Arya always had a mean look on her face when she said such things. No, that's not it. I think I do my job well enough. Displeased with my attitude, Arya's face clearly showed her annoyance. I'm only making and bringing these meals because you always serve hot deli food. Don't you understand that if you come home late because of work, it's all for nothing? Don't you feel even a bit sorry for receiving all these meals I've made? She spoke as if expecting gratitude was a given. I never asked her to cook for us, neither did Noel. Of course, I thanked her and accepted the meals. But it was all Arya imposing her goodwill. To me, it was a nuisance, albeit one I was grateful for. Then, one day, Arya said something that pushed me to my limit. See, I've been thinking. You're never home when I visit, right? So, to avoid wasting these meals, I think it's better if I also have a key to your house. That way, I can drop off the food anytime. Plus, with things being unsafe these days, I can quickly come over if something happens. Just ask Noel to give me a spare key, okay? Hearing this, I realized I couldn't handle it alone anymore. I consulted Noel about Arya. Noel, I need to talk to you about your mom. I can't handle this by myself anymore. What happened? Arya visits our house daily, always without any notice. I do my best to accommodate her when I can, but I can't always be available. I have my own schedule too. Yeah, I get it. And now she wants a spare key to our house. It's hard enough as it is, but if she can enter when we're not home, that's unbearable. If we give her one, she might start coming over all the time. Just the thought is frightening. I'm sorry to speak this way about your mom. Seriously, she said that. I don't like the idea of her coming in with a spare key, either. Okay, I understand. It might be hard for you to say, so I'll talk to her clearly about it. Noel was sympathetic to my concerns and promised to talk to Arya. I hoped this would make things better. Relieved, I was glad I talked to Noel. The next day, while I was at work, Arya called. Sierra, what time will you be home today? What do you mean? Well, I made too much beef stew, Noel's favorite. I thought I'd bring it over. So what time will you be home? I see. In that case, I should be home a little after 7. So I'll definitely be there by 7:30. All right, I'll come around then. Thanks. It might have been the first time Arya called before visiting. Noel must have talked to her already. I was impressed by how quickly things changed. But honestly, I didn't just want her to call before visits. I wanted her to stop visiting altogether. That was my true wish. But for now, I was genuinely happy she called in advance. Arya's visit frequency didn't change, but she started calling beforehand. That alone significantly reduced my stress. However, after a while, I noticed something odd. I started running into Arya more often when I was out. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, like when our family went shopping on the weekend or when I went to buy toys with my child. Or even bumped into her at the station on a weekday evening. Meeting her this frequently seemed too much for coincidence. But strangely, nothing more happened. We'd bump into each other, exchange greetings, explain what we were doing, and that was it. It never led to anything else. Maybe that's why, before I knew it, I had become accustomed to this situation. On one holiday, while this was going on, we decided to clean the house before the delivery of a sofa set. Noel had wanted for a while. We planned to place it in the living room, so that was our primary focus for cleaning. But before we knew it, both Noel and I got carried away and started cleaning the kitchen and bedroom too. It was a completely accidental discovery. In a corner of the bedroom, there was an inconspicuous outlet that seemed unlikely to ever be used. Only a double outlet adapter was plugged in. There. I didn't remember buying it, nor placing it there. Noel didn't recall it either. Both of us felt something was off. Without saying a word to each other, we started checking all the outlets in the house. We found one mysterious outlet adapter each in the kitchen and living room, and another in the bedroom, making 3 in total. By then, we had a feeling about what it might be, but we're too scared to put it into words. It's like those things you see on TV sometimes, isn't it? Who would do this? And why? Where's the banking card? In the middle of my sentence, Noel suddenly asked about the banking card. I was confused, not understanding what Noel meant. Noticing my confusion, Noel asked slowly and clearly, "Is our banking card here? Has it gone missing?" Noel, too, seemed to have his own thoughts on the matter and quickly checked. After confirming the banking card was safe, Noel put his finger to his lips and quietly moved us to the living room. We might be bugged, so it's better not to talk about it. We should be safe here. It's far enough. He said this to reassure me. Should we call the police? In this situation, as I was about to call the police in a panic, Noel stopped me. It's good to report to the police, but let's wait. Reporting without knowing who did it might just waste time. I have an idea. We can report it after that. He then shared his plan with me. Honestly, upon hearing it, I wanted to report it immediately, but Noel seemed to have a hunch. That night, we put the double outlet back in its original place, wrapped in newspaper, with a fan blowing on it continuously. At 2 a.m., the front door quietly opened. A figure quietly entered and headed straight to the living room. Entering the living room, the figure picked up the double outlet, inspecting it closely. We captured all these actions on camera and without any warning turned on the living room lights. The figure panicked at the sudden light. I was momentarily stunned upon seeing the person, but it also felt expected. It was Arya. So it was you. We need an explanation, Mom. Noel spoke calmly, but there was an underlying anger. But Arya turned her anger towards me. Sierra, what is this all about? Even in this situation, she seemed to not understand her position. I just came to check on something, and now even Noel is looking at me like that. What's going on? Don't play dumb. What were you checking by sneaking into our house in the middle of the night? What does it matter? More importantly, why are you two so angry with me? You still don't get it. This was all my husband's idea. We're the ones asking for an explanation, not you, Arya. If you have something to say, answer our questions first. Sierra's right. If you're going to play dumb, we'll call the police. Understand? Noel spoke coldly, and Arya's attitude shifted as if she realized there was no other way. Reporting to the police? That's an overreaction. We're family. There's no need for such formalities. This is all a misunderstanding, so let's not make a big deal out of it. A misunderstanding, you say? Then you better explain yourself clearly to clear it up, unless we are not convinced. Still claiming it's a misunderstanding at this point, there must be a good reason for it, right, Mom? Well, it's just, loneliness. I was lonely, so I did it. Lonely? So you were bugging us, and you expect us to accept that? All this time, Arya's unannounced visits and frequent encounters when we were out were because she had been eavesdropping and monitoring our movements. Unaware of this, I struggled with the invasion of my personal space by Arya, and even blamed myself, thinking I had a problem for not being able to handle it well. I had pushed myself almost to my limit, but it was all because Arya had been eavesdropping. I felt a mix of relief that it wasn't my fault and anger towards Arya's actions, which made my tone and attitude towards her naturally harsher. Do you really think that reason is enough for us to be satisfied? What you're doing, Arya, is absolutely inexcusable. Don't you understand that Sierra's right? Mom, we can't accept that reason, and we can't forgive what you've been doing. I hate to say it, but what you're doing is wrong. If things continue like this, we can't have a relationship like before. Wait, Noel. I'm your parent. How can you say such terrible things to your own mother? You weren't like this before, were you? Arya's face was like that of a forlorn stray cat seeking pity from a passerby, but Noel was even colder and more distant. Who's causing this? Mom? You won't admit your own actions, and your reasons are selfish. It's obviously wrong. Enough is enough. We're leaving. Of course we won't tell you where we're moving, Noel. Why, Arya? Please stop. You've betrayed your own son. Don't you understand how he feels? It seemed the words from her son, Noel, deeply shocked Arya. She was visibly shaken and blustered. All I wanted was to hear an apology from Arya, for her to admit her wrongdoing and then discuss what to do next. But as soon as I spoke to Arya, she glared at me with intense hostility. Quiet. You've been saying whatever you want. It's all because of you that I did this. If you hadn't been here, I wouldn't have had to do any of this. If only you hadn't married Noel. I couldn't comprehend the sudden outburst from Arya. My fault. My fault, I managed to speak, only echoing Arya's words. That's exactly what I mean. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened. I do not acknowledge you as Noel's wife. You're not suitable. That's what I mean. Why? Why say such things so suddenly? It's a problem that you've lied this long without understanding such things. Realize it. It's true what they say. Children from low-level single-parent homes often have issues. Seeing you has only reinforced that belief. Noel, finally catching up to the situation, hurriedly tried to stop Arya. Mom, what are you saying all of a sudden? Do you realize what you're saying? Yes, I understand perfectly. I thought you would feel constrained by marrying a woman from such a low-level family. That's why I was monitoring to prevent any problems. It's all for your sake, Noel. We were baffled by Arya's sudden confession, especially Noel, who seemed to be seeing this side of his mother for the first time. He was unsure how to react. My confusion was different from Noel's. I was perplexed by the words Arya had spoken to me. I had heard those words before. Why had Arya spoken them? That was my confusion. Eventually, I remembered something and asked Arya. Arya, I heard you were a middle school teacher. Is that true? My question, seemingly unrelated to the situation, caused an exaggerated reaction in Arya. From her reaction, something clicked for me. If you were a middle school teacher, you must know many other teachers, right? There's a teacher I can't forget. Is she perhaps an acquaintance of yours? I mentioned a name, and upon hearing it, Arya became visibly shaken and stuttered. Why that name? I thought so. It's connected. Seeing Arya's reaction, I was certain my suspicions were correct. The name I had mentioned was that of my middle school homeroom teacher. I mentioned my middle school homeroom teacher. From your reaction, Arya, it seems you know her. Actually, I was treated terribly by that teacher and got into some trouble. It seems like you've heard about it, haven't you? The trouble with my former teacher was related to my family background. My parents divorced when I was in elementary school. I was taken in by my mom. I was told by my mom that the divorce was due to a personality clash, not because they hated each other. In fact, even after the divorce, my father and I kept in touch regularly. We even had family dinners together several times. Both my parents worked, but they had different life rhythms. There were many mismatches, so they decided it was better to live separately for both of their sakes. Even though they were divorced, I didn't really feel like they were. However, my former homeroom teacher didn't see it that way. She labeled me as a problem child because I came from a single-parent family. Children from low-level single-parent homes are often problematic, I was told directly. No matter how much I tried to explain, she wouldn't listen. To make things worse, she had a troublesome way of managing the class. She believed in uniting the class by targeting one student. By making one student the scapegoat, the rest of the class would come together. She believed in this method, and I became the target. The reason was simple. I was raised in a single-parent family. Perhaps she thought it was okay to do anything to a problematic child like me. Of course, I couldn't accept such reasoning and resisted desperately. Because one of the reasons was my parents' divorce, I couldn't tell them about the treatment I received from the teacher. Resisting as a middle schooler wasn't easy. When I was cornered beyond my capacity, I finally opened up to my parents. I told them how the teacher was treating me. Fortunately, my parents acted quickly upon hearing my story. There was an immediate discussion with my parents and the teacher, and the issue was resolved. The teacher resigned as the class homeroom teacher and left the school unexpectedly in the middle of the year. The issue was resolved quickly after I confided in my parents. But I still remember it vividly. It was that significant of an event. That's why I reacted to Arya's words. If she was acquainted with such a former teacher, I could easily imagine what she had been told about me. But that didn't make me feel any sympathy for Arya. I understood too well what she thought of me. Now it seems, Arya, you didn't hear the whole story from your acquaintance. If you had, you wouldn't have done such a thing. The whole story? What are you talking about? Yes, I was raised in a single-parent home with my mom, but you might not know that I was frequently in contact with my father. Indeed, my parents divorced due to personality differences, but there was another reason, their work. And by the way, my father is a lawyer. Maybe I'm telling you for the first time, but I am a lawyer's daughter. Knowing that someone related to legal expertise is involved, you can understand what your actions mean, right? No, that's a lie. Who would believe that? My former teacher reacted the same way when I told her. You two are quite similar. I didn't hear anything. I haven't heard such a story. No, of course. No one shares inconvenient truths with others. It's natural. Arya's attitude changed completely from her earlier confidence. No one could imagine being bugged by someone whose relative is a lawyer. It's obvious how dangerous that would be for oneself. If I tell my father about what you did, you understand what might happen, right? It could become a bigger issue than you think. Stop! Please don't say that. Please, I beg you. Don't tell anyone about this. Please, I beg you. If that's the case, then answer our questions, okay? Yes, I'll answer. Please, I beg of you. So you heard everything about me from that acquaintance? Yes, that's right. When I mentioned your name, they seemed to know, and then they started telling you about it. Yes, I thought if I found a weakness, I could somehow get Noel to divorce you. I see. That's clear now. I thought this was probably her true intention. From Arya's demeanor, it didn't seem like she had anything else to hide. At the same time, I was somewhat shocked to know she thought this way about me. "Mom, I have no intention of leaving Sierra, just so you know," Noelle said to Arya in a firm tone. "I don't understand what you dislike about Sierra or why you did this, and I don't want to know. But Sierra is an important wife and family member to me. Unfortunately, I think it's better if we don't meet anymore to protect my family. That's it." Yes, Arya could barely respond to Noel's clear declaration of cutting ties, understandably overwhelmed by his decision. The next day, at Noel's insistence, we reported the eavesdropping to my father and the police. We also sent a warning to the former teacher through my father. Surprisingly, the former teacher had no knowledge of Arya's actions. However, given that the teacher's remarks had led to the situation, we strongly demanded she never speak of it again. I can imagine how formidable my father must have been in his anger, but she must have been frightened enough of him. We even received a written pledge that she would never involve herself with us again. After ensuring all these matters were resolved, our family moved. We chose a location near Noel's workplace, but didn't inform Arya at all. As a precaution, we blocked Arya's contact information. Not just me, but Noel did the same. I heard from neighbors near the in-laws' house that Arya, who had been a long-time educator, had a good reputation. Still, her deeds became widely known when the police got involved. Rumors sparked more rumors, and Arya began to be viewed coldly by everyone in the neighborhood, eventually being left alone. Now, Arya is said to be living alone in her house with no one visiting her, almost unrecognizable from her former self. Even after hearing about Arya's current situation, I had no intention of forgiving her. In my mind, I've resolved to act as if Arya never existed from the start. Now that I have no ties with Arya, I plan to cherish my family even more.
You can't be serious, Derek. The words tumbled out before I could even process the document he'd just slapped down in front of me. Divorce papers. We were just hours away from leaving for our dream honeymoon in Bali, and my fiancé of 2 years wanted to call the whole wedding off. I glared up at him, rage boiling inside me. Explain yourself. Now. Derek swallowed, avoiding my searing gaze. It's my parents. They insist on coming with us on the trip, or else they'll make you divorce me? Is that what our relationship means to you? No, Marissa, that's not. Save it. I held up a hand. Blood roared in my ears. After all my efforts navigating his manipulative family, he still bent to their every command. I refuse to spend my honeymoon catering to your overbearing mother's ego. Please try to understand, Derek pleaded. It's just how my family is. Traditional. They feel like they should be included in all major events. I crossed my arms. And you didn't think to mention this sooner? We sent out the invitations months ago. Everything is booked. I know. He slumped down in the nearest chair. I thought if I told you earlier, you'd call the wedding off. Mom insisted I wait until the last second. Cold fury washed over me. So this ambush was strategic. Evelyn deliberately chose our weakest moment to force her demands. Now the coward expected sympathy? I met his watery gaze, anger broiling inside me. How could I have been so stupid to not see through this ruse? He sipped vodka, liquid courage to gaslight me. Behind his pathetic facade hid a spineless mama's boy, drunk on control. My voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Get out. I'm calling this thing off myself. Panic flashed across Derek's face. Marissa, please, we can work through this. He reached for my hand. I recoiled sharply. Don't touch me. It's clear where your priorities lie, and frankly, I refuse to play second fiddle to your lunatic family. He flinched like I'd slapped him across the face. A year ago, that vulnerability would have softened me, but now the gesture only fanned my fury. How many times had his toxic relatives belittled, undermined, and insulted me? I was done being silenced and pushed around. I strode forward until we stood nose to nose. If you had an ounce of integrity, you'd stand up to them instead of hiding behind Mommy's skirt like an infant. My finger jabbed into his chest, punctuating each remark as his eyes bugged with fear. But unfortunately, you were raised to be helpless, weak, codependent. With impeccable timing, his phone rang. Evelyn's smug face flashed on the screen. I spun away before I slapped her image off the table. This ended now. I would not be blindsided again. As I packed my bags, resolve fortified my shaking limbs. If it was war Evelyn wanted, then war she would have. The morning light filtering into my studio provided little warmth as I scrutinized the guest list for our would-be wedding reception. One by one, I mentally cataloged each name based on their level of enmeshment with Evelyn's toxic web of social connections. I reflected bitterly how I once viewed this list as the bonding of my chosen family with Derek's. How naive I'd been. A knock interrupted my brooding. My assistant Josie entered, her arms full of fabric samples for an upcoming client consultation. One look at my expression and her cheerful smile faded. "What's wrong?" She dropped the swatches on my desk with a soft whump. "Did that witch make trouble again?" I let out a harsh laugh. That's putting it mildly. Over the next half hour, I recounted the ambush and ensuing fallout. Josie's shock shifted to outrage the more details I shared. "That absolute harpy!" Josie exploded, crashing her fist on my desk. Model houses and fabric samples jumped. She planned this sabotage from the start, waited until you couldn't back out without losing thousands. I dropped my head in my hands with a groan. I walked straight into their trap. I should have trusted my instincts when his family resisted every wedding plan. Josie clasped my shoulder, her expression solemn. "This wasn't your fault. Derek misled you, probably under orders from that Gorgon he calls mother." Anger reignited in my gut. Josie was right. Evelyn orchestrated this pretense of support while plotting my removal once I fully committed. I thought of her smug expression when I asked for input on centerpieces, cake designs, vows. My head jerked upward. "The speech!" Josie frowned. "What speech?" I gripped her wrist, mind racing. "My bridesmaid speech, where I planned to publicly thank Evelyn for welcoming me into their family." I groaned, envisioning her barely concealed delight. She knew I'd be humiliated when Derek left me at the altar. Josie's eyes narrowed to slits. "That heartless witch!" I strode toward my mock-ups and fabric samples. A plan was formulating. Evelyn's machinations had provided the perfect ammunition. Now I would deploy it against her. I turned to Josie with new conviction. "Help me tear this place apart. We need to examine every wedding-related item with Evelyn's fingerprints. There must be more evidence of her plotting." Josie met my gaze, mirroring my look of dawning comprehension. Together we would expose Evelyn's deceit and render her the social pariah she deserved to be. Derek may have abandoned our partnership, but I had Josie's fierce loyalty, and that meant everything to me now. "Let's give that old crone a taste of her own medicine," Josie said through gritted teeth. I squeezed her hand, gratitude and anticipation coursing through me. "Game on, Evelyn. Your reckoning is coming." The following weeks passed in a blur of late nights poured over scandalous wedding mementos. Each custom invitation mocked me, Evelyn's fingerprints all over the intricate floral details she insisted complement the lace and chiffon monstrosity of a dress she selected. Like a spider, the cunning woman spun her web slowly, ensnaring me strand by silken strand. Josie became my anchor during this turbulent period. Together we dissected the mountain of wedding debris occupying my studio space, seeking any clue that could aid my vengeance. "Bingo!" Josie yelled late one Tuesday night. I jerked awake where I had nodded off at my work table, nearly upending my stone-cold coffee. Josie stood near the mock altar, holding a framed photo from Derek's cousin's wedding 2 years prior. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you," she said, "but look what I found in the pile of Derek's stuff." I squinted at the image of Derek dancing with a blonde woman, their bodies pressed together suggestively. My gut twisted with anger and vindication. So Derek's wandering eye wasn't a recent development, after all. Josie shook her head with disgust. "I remember Evelyn boasting this was the event where Derek introduced her to you. Guess she conveniently forgot the part where her darling boy toy got handsy with another woman behind his girlfriend's back." My fists clenched with the urge to hurl something fragile. Instead, I took a deep breath. "Have that photo printed and discreetly show a few key people. Let the gossip mill do some work for us." Josie's grin turned wolfish. "With pleasure. I know just who to share this with, too. That will get tongues wagging." She tucked the frame under her arm and sauntered out. As the door swung shut, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. The name sapped the momentary satisfaction right out of me. Derek. Speak of the devil. I stared down at the screen, debating between ignoring it and indulging my curiosity. Curiosity won out. Derek. Hey, babe. Mom's still pretty upset about us postponing the wedding. Wants to meet up to clear the air. I scowled. The gall of that woman playing innocent while her spineless son begged me to reconcile with her. Evelyn orchestrated this entire debacle. If anyone owed apologies, it was her. Still, the text presented an opportunity. Perhaps I could covertly gather intel for my brewing plot. And honestly, I craved watching Evelyn squirm when she realized her machinations failed. After some consideration, I typed a response. Me. Fine. Meet me tomorrow at our old cafe, just you and me. Leave your mother out of this. Derek began typing immediately, but I silenced my phone and headed home before he could worm his way back into my thoughts further. I needed rest for the performance of a lifetime tomorrow. Evelyn would rue the day she chose me as her adversary. With Josie's help securing damning evidence, I would avenge myself yet. I arrived at the cafe early, surveying the space like a cougar seeking vulnerable prey. Fortunately, the quaint shop was nearly empty, save a few patrons nibbling scones with textbooks or laptops. I selected a small table in the back corner, ideal for monitoring the entrance while remaining inconspicuous. Right on time, the bell above the door chimed. I glimpsed Derek's sandy hair first as he scanned the room. His shoulders sagged with relief, spotting me tucked away. Odd. I expected to see his mother latched onto him despite my explicit request she not attend. Derek approached my table cautiously, as if nearing a hissing viper instead of his ex-fiancée. He cleared his throat. Hey, Marissa. Thanks for agreeing to meet me. I gestured curtly to the seat across from me. Best to get straight to business since he decided to follow my instructions for once. Might as well use the opportunity for intelligence gathering. As Derek settled into his chair, I crossed my arms against my chest as a makeshift shield. His eyes held that familiar puppy dog look I once found so charming. Now it only amplified my disgust. How could I have loved such a feeble coward? Well? I prompted when the silence stretched uncomfortably. You insisted on this little chat, so speak. He winced at my biting tone. Right, I know tensions are high lately with my family. I cut him off with a sharp laugh. Are you seriously trying to blame your mother for ambushing me with divorce papers days before our wedding? I'm aware of her manipulations, but you stood there holding the dagger, Derek. I didn't want to. He held up placating hands to halt my tirade. Mom gave me no choice, said I had to show my loyalty or she'd cut me off. My lip curled with disgust. So it all came down to money then? I leaned forward. Time to poke the viper's nest. Well, you chose, and in doing so revealed exactly where we stood all along. That backstabbing display proved our relationship was a sham. Derek visibly paled. Come on, Marissa, don't say that. I still care deeply for you. His voice dropped. I was just protecting our future. I let out an acidic laugh that burned my throat. Our future? Don't make me laugh. I gripped his chin, relishing his wince. The only future you were protecting was your own, spineless as ever. I shoved his face away and grabbed my bag, resolved to purge this poison from my life forever. His gasps and stammers faded behind me as I strode proudly into my hard-won freedom. I strode out of the cafe with adrenaline pumping through my veins. The confrontation went even better than I imagined. Derek crumbled under the slightest pressure, revealing his spinelessness and Evelyn's vice grip on him. My suspicions were confirmed. Their family orchestrated this sabotage for financial gain, caring nothing for my dreams they eagerly crushed. Well, no more. I refused to waste another minute dwelling on their toxic web of lies. As I rounded the street corner, focused on hailing a taxi, my phone rang loudly. I didn't need to glance at the name flashing across the screen to guess who interrupted my dramatic exit. Likely the sniveling coward wanted the last word to salve his wounded pride. What do you want, Derek? I answered briskly, my tone sharp enough to sever bone. An acidic chuckle answered me instead. Come now, dear, is that any way to speak to your future mother-in-law? I froze in my tracks, knuckles whitening around my phone. Evelyn, I hissed between clenched teeth. To what do I owe the displeasure? Her answering laugh oozed false sympathy. Oh, I just had the most distressing chat with my son. He's absolutely inconsolable after your callous treatment earlier. Red flashed across my vision. I trembled with rage barely contained. Callous? I'm not the one who ambushed my fiancé with divorce papers and ridiculous ultimatums days before our wedding. Each word shot out like bullets from a machine gun. If anyone has been callous, deceitful, and manipulative here, it's you. A weighty pause followed my accusations, heavy with unspoken threats. When Evelyn spoke again, her prim voice dripped venom. Clearly this wedding debacle has overwhelmed that dramatic little mind of yours. Let's avoid further unpleasantness for all parties, shall we? The implication stood starkly against her genteel words. Comply or live to regret it. This time I embraced my fury like armor. Here's an idea, I replied, danger lurking beneath my steady tone. Stay out of my life from this moment on. Keep your toxicity away from me and we'll have no issue. I relished the sharp intake of breath through the phone, waited eagerly for her scathing retort. Instead, flat resignation greeted me after a taut minute. I see. Well then. Her icy words sliced the tense silence between us. I wish you luck finding someone willing to tolerate that disrespectful attitude of yours. You'll certainly need it with your deficiencies. I stood trembling on that busy sidewalk long after she disconnected. The final veiled insult echoed in my ears, an ominous portent. But this time I refused to cower before Evelyn's threats. I would have the last word. Squaring my shoulders, I continued onward with purpose, fueling each stride. My taxi waited around the corner, engine rumbling in anticipation. I slid inside, resolve stealing my nerves. Where to, miss? One glance at Derek's desperate stream of texts solidified my intent. The airport, I announced. I'm taking back my life. The tropical heat enveloped me like a heavy wool blanket as I exited the airport. Despite the late hour, thick moisture clung to my skin, an apt metaphor for the drama I hoped to leave behind. I breathed deeply, orienting myself in this foreign environment. The scent of salt and palm trees mingled with exhaust fumes as luggage-toting tourists filed past me to awaiting cars. So different from the carefully cultivated towers of steel and glass I designed, yet intriguing in its chaotic harmony all the same. As I headed toward the taxi queue, my burner phone vibrated, startling me from my contemplative reprieve. I grimaced, expecting another pleading missive from Derek, likely begging me to reconcile after his latest sob session with Mommy Dearest. The coward remained so securely apron-stringed I wagered Evelyn still taste-tested his meals daily. Instead, an unlisted number flashed across the cracked screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Marissa Winters, I stated briskly. After the confrontation with Evelyn, taking risks felt exhilarating instead of terrifying. A throat cleared on the other end. Marissa, it's Richard Thomas. We met at Derek's firm Christmas party a while back. I racked my brain trying to conjure a face. Flashes of ugly Christmas sweaters and watered-down cocktails surfaced. Derek introduced me to so many of his colleagues that night, few made an impression. Except... Richard, of course, I exclaimed, snapping my fingers. You were the only charming person in the lot. How are you? He chuckled. I'm well. Listen, I apologize if contacting you seems forward, but I saw your RSVP cancellation and wanted to reach out. I bristled, preparing a frosty retort about gossip chains, but Richard continued sincerely, giving me pause. Truly sorry if I'm overstepping, but from our conversation at the party, you seemed quite lovely and too mature for Derek's circle. He hesitated before adding gently, I guess my instincts were right, considering the broken engagement. My defensiveness wavered at his somber tone. Perhaps word spread about Derek's family sabotaging our wedding far and wide if sympathetic colleagues reached out. Their deceit impacting my reputation fueled my next bold move. I smiled slyly. Richard, no need to apologize for calling. In fact, I'd love to get coffee sometime and... chat. I put slight emphasis on the final word, implying more. He inhaled sharply, clearly not expecting my response, but he recovered smoothly. Chat, huh? I'd be delighted. Maybe over dinner instead when you're next in town? It's a date. After finalizing plans to meet up in a few weeks, I hung up feeling re-energized. An attractive, successful man sought my company despite the gossip. Already my revenge stirred interest. Whistling to myself, I climbed into the waiting taxi, directing the driver to my oceanside resort. As we lurched into chaotic traffic under swaying palms, I reflected on the remaining loose ends awaiting my return home. But for now, tropical adventure called. And with Richard's intriguing overture, both business and pleasure soon awaited me. Stunning Derek's circles with my quick rebound would deliver the ultimate vengeance. I intended to savor every minute of their downfall, starting now. The weeks apart served me well, bringing much-needed distance and clarity. I channeled my energy into the budding relationship with Richard, now my official boyfriend. He accompanied me to various industry events, stealing Derek's spotlight effortlessly with his charisma and genuinely supportive nature. My reputation not only remained untarnished from the broken engagement, but improved tenfold on Richard's arm. Still, the thirst for vengeance simmered beneath the surface as Evelyn and Derek kept painfully low profiles in avoidance. Their absence from the social scene fueled rumors faster than any coordinated scheme. Josie kept me informed of the choicest gossip tidbits concerning their family's dirty laundry airing. "The vultures are circling," Josie commented one night as we reviewed her intelligence over dinner. "With you AWOL and their circle fractured, people feel emboldened to question Evelyn's authority." I smirked at that, taking a deliberately slow sip of wine, savoring the news. Perfect. Those frauds deserve every ounce of scrutiny coming their way. What about Derek? "Oh, he's positively miserable according to office chatter," Josie replied with relish. "Got passed over for some promotion thanks to your little coffee confrontation exposing his weak backbone." My laughter echoed around the table, unleashed and carefree at last. Let Derek drown in the career limbo his mommy dear sentenced him to, chained under her supervision. Served the coward right for casting me aside at her command. Several weeks later, karma came full circle at a benefit gala. I glided into the opulent ballroom on Richard's arm, effortlessly commanding attention in a shimmering A-line gown, exposing just enough skin to make heads turn discreetly. Outwardly cool and collected, despite the RSVP listing, Derek and his parents in attendance, I prepared to deliver a killing blow to their social standing. As we mingled casually amidst tinkling glasses and boisterous laughter, I spotted my targets whispering together in a distant corner. From their huddled postures and darting eyes, they clearly sensed predatory danger, but found themselves unable to escape my trap. I left Richard chatting with a colleague and cut deliberately across the room, 2 flutes of champagne in hand, as I closed in for the attack. My glittering smile remained locked in place as I stepped neatly into their space, just as their urgent whispers died. "Evelyn, darling!" I exclaimed brightly, leaning in to brush her stiff cheek with mine as I extended a champagne glass. "How wonderful to see you!" Evelyn's answering smile sharpened into a grimace under her expertly blended makeup. Derek pointedly avoided my gaze beside her, wilting under the heat of my satisfying revenge. "Marissa," Evelyn replied, thin as glass and just as delicate. "What a surprise." Her eyes tracked Richard subtly as he observed our interaction nearby, assessing the new threat. I maintained my dazzling grin, refusing to cede ground. The board was so generous to include me for Table 9's auction item tonight, though I'm certain my date outbid your usual ask. I flashed my eyes coyly toward Richard, watching realization sink Evelyn's painted features. "Yes, well," she faltered uncharacteristically. "I suppose we misjudged your resilience after that unpleasant incident." Derek cringed at the mention, but remained silent. Still spineless as ever then. I almost pitied his misery. Almost. Instead, I channeled that simmering fury into a final, brutal strike. I stepped nearer and dropped my voice. "Clearly you underestimated me, Evelyn dear, attempted to bury me socially and career-wise, but only dug your own grave." I gestured subtly around us where partygoers observed our tense exchange. Rumors abound regarding certain indiscretions and manipulations, all thanks to your bungled schemes. Her eyes narrowed, hard and reflective as glass, but I continued before she uttered the threat teetering behind her lips. "However, seeing as tonight heralds new beginnings, allow me to extend professional courtesy." I allowed frost to permeate my sugary tone. "Stay out of my way permanently, and perhaps I refrain from exposing every excruciating detail of your family's cruelty. Are we clear?" Evelyn's expression soured, no doubt swallowing venom. Through rigid lips she forced out, "Crystal." I crumpled my champagne flute delicately in one hand, savoring her demise. "Excellent. Do give Richard and me some space. We have a charity auction to win. Ta-ta! I sauntered away after one lingering look at Derek's crestfallen face, riding the ultimate high of sweet revenge. Their reputations smoldered in ruins thanks to my flawless execution. Now, at long last, balanced justice and freedom were mine.
This house was sold to the eldest son and his wife. Everyone else, get out now. In the face of unbelievable remarks from my in-laws and John, who are making me pay the mortgage on their home, I realized that they had been with me from the beginning just to make me pay the mortgage. The moment I realized this fact, my feelings changed from gratitude to hatred in an instant. Then, I'll be moving out. Facing their mocking remarks, I answered with a defiant smile. I'll make them regret picking a fight with me, all the way to the depths of hell. I immediately turned to someone for help and began plotting my revenge against the three of them. My name is Gina Kane. I am 48 years old and work at a law firm as a lawyer. Currently, I am supporting my in-laws and my husband while managing our lives. It all started when I gifted a house to my in-laws. John and I got married when I was 30 years old. When our marriage was decided, my father-in-law encountered an unforeseen accident. He injured his leg, making it difficult to stand on his own, and was forced to live in a wheelchair. Concerned about the elder care needed as my mother-in-law is also not young, I gifted my in-laws an accessible home. At first, they were considering living in public housing. But since they would be living midway between our workplaces, I suggested that we could come to help whenever needed. I want to repay the Kane family for all they've done for my father. My father had died before I got married. Just before he passed away, he was burdened with a large debt, and our household finances were in dire straits. To repay debts, I took on more debts, living a hellish life. John and his family saved us from this situation. John and his parents took on the burden of my father's debts. If you're hesitant to marry because of the debt, just pay it back, and it'll be fine, right? That's how our parents feel too. That's right. The company went bankrupt, and you incurred the debts. Not from playing around, so there's no reason not to help. That's right. When times are tough, we should help each other. There's no need to feel guilty or inferior. Saying this, John and his parents silently provided most of the financial aid. My father and I, in tears, expressed our gratitude. And I desperately took the lawyer's exam. The amount borrowed from John and his parents totaled just under $50,000. Once I became a lawyer and earned money, I could definitely repay it during my lifetime. I hated the idea of remaining indebted for financial support. I absolutely had to pass the exam and become a lawyer. With this determination, I worked tirelessly. Thanks to my efforts, I passed the lawyer exam on my first attempt. Naturally, I received congratulations from my in-laws as well. I immediately found employment and began working at a law firm. The director was a kind person, and the office had skilled lawyers in its ranks. I quickly improved under the guidance of my senior colleagues. Eventually, I met clients who contracted with me exclusively. And now I am a female lawyer with an annual income exceeding $100,000, serving as a figurehead for the office. As my work began to stabilize, I completely repaid the debts to my parents. My father, thinking he had no more regrets in this world, followed my mother, who had passed away earlier. After my parents passed away and I was left alone, John proposed marriage to me. You are a strong woman who can live on your own, but I want to be a man who can support you. I will continue to cherish you, so won't you marry me? Thus, our marriage was decided, and I thought a smooth sailing life would begin. However, just then, my father-in-law encountered an accident. Owing to the significant favor I had received in the past, I insisted against the hesitations of my in-laws and offered to build a new barrier-free house. The gratitude I feel towards your parents is not enough, even with this. So, please don't hesitate. I want you to live a life without any inconveniences. It was heartfelt, not flattery or pretense. I conveyed my true feelings. Perhaps moved by my passion, my in-laws reluctantly smiled and accepted my proposal. However, immediately after agreeing, they continued with a but. Gina, why don't you live with us? You were looking for a house to live with John, weren't you? That's right. If you don't mind, let's live together. After we're gone, the house will belong to you guys anyway. John has one older brother. 3 years older, he had married and moved out years ago. Busy with his own business, he entrusted all home matters to John, as I had heard from my mother-in-law. In return for taking care of my in-laws, John was free to do as he wished with their property. Before marrying and moving out, his brother had verbally promised John this arrangement. If we could live in the new house, which would become our family home, the commute to work would be closer. Living together, we could be of help in case of any issues. And there was indeed no reason not to. However, living with a stranger like me might cause inconvenience to my in-laws. Despite the trouble I had caused even before marrying, I hesitated to agree, feeling anxious about whether it was okay for me to live with them. Sensing my hesitation, John put his hand on my shoulder and smiled reassuringly. I will be your support. Everything will be all right. Don't worry. With those words from John, I agreed to live with my in-laws. I thought we would live happily as a family of 4 from then on. However, such a sweet life did not exist. Gina, where did you put my morning clothes? Mrs. Gina, the TV remote isn't working. Gina, can you lend me a shoulder? I want to sit on the sofa. After moving in together for 13 years, the people in this house have been telling me to do everything. They have no intention of doing anything themselves, and everyone asks me for everything. Even my father-in-law, taking advantage of his disability, has been freely touching me wherever he wants. I've already prepared and hung the morning clothes, haven't I? Mom, that's the air conditioner remote, and the TV remote is on the desk. Dad, please let John assist you when he's here, not me. I can't support you properly. Initially, I tolerated the dissatisfaction and handled everyone's needs. It's a joke to be burdened with both the mortgage and all the household duties. I thought about divorce many times. However, each time John skillfully covered for me, and my in-laws pleaded. My resolve wavered, and I refrained from divorcing. Finally, my mother-in-law possibly started showing mild cognitive impairment or dementia, though it's unclear which. John, who had always said he would be my support before marriage, turned out to be utterly unreliable. Can I really continue like this? With these doubts, I continued living, but as you experience things, you adapt. Before I knew it, I had adjusted to the environment, completed everything before being told, and became able to express my opinions clearly to John and others. However, I couldn't overlook my father-in-law's overbearing actions, and I complained to both John and even my mother-in-law. I just can't overlook what Dad does. Recently, he even pretends to be senile to touch me. Mom, please do something about it. My father-in-law has not been diagnosed with dementia. Specifically, he went for a diagnosis, but was not officially diagnosed with dementia. It's too mild to judge whether it's cognitive impairment or not, according to the doctor. Don't say that? It's because of his disability. Can't be helped. It's true that tendencies of dementia can cause such behavior. However, such things happen in more severe stages. As for my father-in-law's actions, he is just doing whatever he wants, using the word cognitive as a shield. Despite explaining that the doctor did not diagnose him with dementia, my in-laws stubbornly insist he has it, and conveniently use it to excuse any inconvenient behavior. If it were really dementia, I wouldn't say a thing. However, using illness as a shield to impose patience on others is absolutely unacceptable. I've also spoken to John, asking him to do something about his parents. But every time, he shows annoyance and brushes it off, saying we'll handle it later. I was reaching my limit of patience when something completely unexpected happened. This month it's all paid off. I'll finally be freed from this hell. One afternoon, when I was off work, I was organizing the household accounts and my diary. While looking at the bank book, I realized something that brightened my expression at the end of this month. The mortgage for the in-laws' house would finally be repaid. Filled with a sense of accomplishment, I felt as though a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Thinking that I would now have a little more money to spend freely made me incredibly happy. But this was just the beginning of the real hell. Gina, was the mortgage payoff supposed to be this month? During dinner that night, John suddenly asked about the mortgage. He had never mentioned it before, so I was puzzled by his sudden interest. He smiled affably and poured beer into a glass for me. Yes, but why do you ask all of a sudden? Well, shouldn't we celebrate? I've put a lot of pressure on you up until now. Gina. I mean it as a thank you, and I want to have a big celebration. I was taken aback by his unexpected words. I was surprised that John thought this way, and that he was aware of the burden he had placed on me. I thought to myself that he could have helped more with the housework. But it seemed he had his own thoughts about everything. Any dissatisfaction I felt vanished in an instant with his words. And I couldn't help but smile broadly. John, thank you. Can I look forward to the celebration? Of course. I'll discuss it with my parents and start preparing. Just look forward to it, Gina. Without any doubts, I accepted his invitation. It seemed he had already discussed this with his parents, and the three of them started making preparations. A few weeks later, I was summoned by John and his parents. It was a calm period at work, and I had some free time, making it a good time to be celebrated. Sorry for calling you out of the blue like this. That's totally fine. Today, we, as a family, have something important to discuss with you, Gina. Discuss? I thought it might be about the celebration. But why would they phrase it so ominously? Normally, they would just say it straightforwardly. With these doubts, I listened attentively to their conversation. Actually, along with the mortgage repayment. We'd like you to move out of the house, Gina. Huh? At their unexpected words, I blurted out in shock. Leave the house along with the mortgage repayment? What am I being told? Could it be a misunderstanding? Even if I wished it were, the statement wouldn't be unreasonable. I couldn't quite grasp what John had said, leaving me utterly dumbfounded and unable to respond to his question. Seeing my stunned reaction, my in-laws, growing impatient, quickly continued speaking. We sold the house to the eldest son and his wife. What? I couldn't understand at all. Just as I was told to move out. Now they say the house has been sold to the eldest son and his wife. They must mean I'm no longer needed, but such an unreasonable claim was unbearable. What have I done to deserve this? If we've given you such a fine house as a gift, then we no longer have any need for you, Gina. We only lived together with you until the mortgage was paid off because we had to. But now that we own the house, you're of no use to us. I had felt immense gratitude towards John's family. I had been so grateful to his family for helping my father. And me that I lived with them without complaint until today. But now, I realized it was all an act. They helped my father and me back then just to make me do something. They knew I was desperate to pay off my father's debt and become a lawyer. So they thought investing in me might pay off double. It was just a gamble. Everything was set up to make me buy the house. You were right to think that if you owed us a favor, you'd give us something big in return. Ever since we were dating, I've been doing this. And I never thought the investment would be wasted. Just going to check on Dad once made you so happy. And you'd give us expensive wine as thanks. What a gullible woman. That was before my father's company went bankrupt. Our family was fairly well off until then. John had targeted me from the beginning for my family's wealth. And he already knew I was aiming to be a lawyer. That's why he thought it was worth going this far. Unaware of all this, I completely trusted John and his family. How foolish. I felt disgusted with myself. That's why we planned this. If we did a favor for your father, maybe we'd get something big in return. As a result, a huge success. We got this fine, newly built house in our name. Once the mortgage is paid off, it's ours. We can do whatever we want with our own property. And you have no right to say anything about it, do you? It was hard to accept the inhuman statements of the three people. Everything had been planned from the beginning. For these 13 years, the three of them had been quietly waiting for this moment. They never loved me. Nor did they genuinely care about my father, they just saw him as a money tree. From the beginning, they had approached our family with this scenario in mind. Faced with this unbelievable reality, I felt like everything was going dark before my eyes. My emotions were plummeting into the abyss. This was truly despair. At that moment, the word despair perfectly described my state. I couldn't comprehend what they had done, thought, or were doing. That's why, strangers like you should get out now. You no longer have a place in this house. Of course you have some luggage, so right now is impossible. John, that would be too pitiful. Tomorrow. We'll give you until tomorrow. So, pack up your things and get out by then. This house now belongs to us, the Kane family. Oh, and we'll need a divorce too. There's no need to be married anymore, and I'm tired of your nagging. When you leave the house tomorrow, just sign on the divorce papers. The words Kane family weighed heavily on my mind. From the beginning, I was not treated as a member of the Kane family. That's why they treated me so unfairly, worked me like a slave, and made me juggle home and work like a workhorse. As all the pieces finally connected, a dry smile spilled from me. From the beginning, I was deceived by your family. That's what I've been saying. Are you that stupid? Can't you understand even that? John's last words seemed to snap something inside me. I lifted my bowed head, feigned a full smile, and gave my in-laws a surprising reply. Then, I'll be moving out. Suddenly displaying a bright smile, I casually agreed to leave the house, leaving John and my in-laws with shocked expressions. Wow, you're being surprisingly obedient. What are you plotting? Plotting? That's impossible. This sudden, nonsensical story has knocked me down to the lowest point of my life. That's why my love for your family cooled off instantly. I'll pack my things and leave today. I will also sign the divorce papers properly. Later, I'll have someone from my office contact you about the division of property. Thank you for everything up to now." After saying this, I didn't wait for a reply from my in-laws and rushed to my room. I suppressed the urge to cry as I packed, thinking about what would come next. I can't let them get away with treating me like a rag. I must make them experience the pain they've inflicted on me. Otherwise, I'd regret it when I die. While packing, I decided on revenge. And to really hurt them, I pondered what could be done. As I was packing, a phone call came in. Seeing the caller's name, I came up with a plan. This person might be able to help me. The moment I thought that, I answered the call and confided everything to them. We discussed the next steps and agreed to put the plan into action immediately. After finishing packing, I left the house where I had lived for many years without saying goodbye to John and his family, and I immediately deleted their contact information. I set things up so they couldn't reach me, and it worked right away. The day after I left the house, I received a barrage of calls from my in-laws. Although I had deleted their contact, my brain naturally remembered the familiar numbers. Seeing those unwanted numbers first thing in the morning was disheartening. They must have realized what had happened to them by now. But I did not answer their calls. Like watching from a higher ground, I looked down at my phone and smiled. "You don't ever have to answer," said the person who had taken me in, speaking kindly to me. I nodded to them just once. Then, calls from John started coming in. Overwhelmed by the noise, I reached my limit, turned off my phone, and never turned it on again. I canceled the service. Several months later, I found a new apartment and started living there. I handled my work smoothly and enriched every day without the stress I had felt while living at my in-laws' house, free from the environment that had been a burden on my life. After the divorce, people told me I looked healthier, more beautiful, and brighter, and I received more compliments on my approachability. Previously, my mind had been so preoccupied with my in-laws' house that I hadn't had time to socialize properly at work. From now on, I'm going to work harder. I'll communicate more with everyone. I'll value my relationships with people. It was then that something happened. The receptionist at my office rushed onto the floor, her face pale, and spoke to me urgently. "Ms. Walters, there's a parent and child at the reception yelling for Ms. Walters to come out." Walters is my maiden name and my current surname. Normally, she handles her duties coolly and amiably, so it must be something serious for her to be so upset. A concerned male colleague offered to accompany me, and as we headed to the lobby, I saw the person there and my expression hardened. "There she is. Mom, I found Gina." "Gina? What do you mean by this? Cutting off contact is cruel. Do you have any idea what we've been through since then?" The people who had come were my mother-in-law and John, and they were shouting throughout the office. Their nerve to act so shamelessly had me doubting their sanity, and their disgraceful behavior drew disgusted looks from everyone around. In just a few months without seeing them, their faces had become gaunt, and they glared at me with bloodshot eyes. Sensing the gravity of the situation, another receptionist seemed to have gone to call someone higher up. And soon after, the president, having heard the commotion, appeared in the lobby. "Ms. Walters, I have prepared a reception room. Why don't you talk to your in-laws there? I will contact him." Since I had confided everything to the president beforehand, I nodded to his suggestion. I felt uneasy going alone with them, so I asked my colleague to accompany me. He was the lawyer I had hired for the issue with John. So John and his parents agreed to his presence. We all headed to the reception room. Even as we walked to the reception room, John and his mother glared at me resentfully. Despite their own desperate situation, they seemed to dislike seeing me enjoying my work carefree. Their gazes and demeanor made it abundantly clear how much they disliked the atmosphere. As I sat facing John and his mother, continuing our stare down, a person came into the reception room with the president. "Sorry, I'm late." "What? Why is my brother here?" The person the president brought was John's brother, my brother-in-law. He stood imposingly, glaring at the two with an angry expression. "There's no crap here." "You two, how dare you pull such a stunt?" My brother-in-law had been a tough guy since the old days, and when he was younger, he was the leader of a biker gang that controlled this area. Now, he runs his own company in the construction industry. His employees affectionately call him boss. And he despises behavior that strays from human decency. I had sought help from my brother-in-law for this situation, and he was furious when he heard the circumstances. He had sheltered me in the female dormitory of his workplace for several weeks, taking care of me until I found a place to live. He had also checked on the house that was given to my in-laws. My brother-in-law had been unaware of everything until I informed him. The reason my brother-in-law hadn't known about any of this was because my mother-in-law and others had declared that they had sold the house to the eldest son and his wife when they told me to leave. The reason he didn't know. I had Sandra spill the beans and checked everything out behind the scenes. They've done such a terrible thing to Gina. They don't think they can get away with it, do they? The moment Sandra's name was mentioned, John and his mother's faces turned pale. Sandra, my brother-in-law's wife, was the mastermind behind this whole series. As the wife of the eldest son, she had despised me for some reason since a long time ago. She had been a housewife all her life, following her husband's orders not because he demanded it, but because her parents had taught her that a woman's place is in the home. Living with the belief that women who can't manage household chores aren't real women. She had lived her life according to that principle. But how must I have appeared to her? My vibrant dedication to my work must have been dazzling to her, overturning nearly 40 years of her fixed beliefs. Moreover, Sandra was disastrously bad at cooking. Even my father-in-law had studied cooking and had asked my mother-in-law to teach her, which John had told me about, indicating just how poor her skills were. However, I am someone who can manage household chores normally. Moreover, I was able to handle housework better than Sandra while also balancing my job. She must have been envious of me, who could do everything. Every time we met, Sandra would make snide remarks to me. She would say things like I neglected my home because of my job or call me a wife without gumption for making her husband do household chores. I had been subjected to such nasty comments countless times over the decades. But each time, my brother-in-law had stopped her. Surely, that too was a source of displeasure for Sandra. My brother-in-law had even told her she could go to work if she wanted to. And he contributed to the household chores himself. It was her own decision not to take action. And it was entirely misplaced for her to lash out at others for that. When my brother-in-law lectured Sandra about this, she began to detest me as if taking her frustrations out on me. When I confronted Sandra, she confessed that the whole plan to take over the house and make me buy it was orchestrated by her. She had instigated our parents into this plan, thinking that if they owned the house and pretended to be senile, Gina wouldn't be able to say anything to them. thinking it safe to contact my brother-in-law while I was unable to do so. Everyone did as they pleased. John had also been paid a role in this affair, making everyone accomplices. The only one who had been completely unaware was my brother-in-law. If he had known, such foolishness could have been stopped. I believe he feels terribly sorry about this whole situation. I see. That's why everyone behaved themselves in front of you, Big Brother. Every time my brother-in-law came to the house, my in-laws did not dare to do anything. They probably knew what would happen if he found out about their actions. The president and my colleagues listening to the conversation were also appalled by how my in-laws were behaving. So, what should we do with you? We're not planning to forgive a single thing. Not the disgrace you brought upon us, nor the trouble you caused Gina. But this all started with Sandra. That's right. We just got carried away by her convincing talk. We didn't mean any harm. No harm, you say? Hearing John's words, my patience snapped. I stood up abruptly. My face contorted with rage, and shouted at my mother-in-law and John. You think no harm intended excuses what you did? Do you have any idea how I felt these past 13 years, staying by your side? As I vented the feelings I'd been suppressing, tears of anger and frustration spilled out. Neither my mother-in-law nor John had ever seen me cry. No matter how harshly they treated me, I endured and persevered. Even when I was accused of dementia and harassed at will, I never showed any tears. I lived through it all. They probably thought of me as a strong woman who never cries. Seeing such a person raise their voice and shed tears must have been shocking for them. Do you even understand how grateful I was to you all? How much I thought I owed you a debt of gratitude? To find out that your kindness was for such a vile reason. I can't forgive you. I will never forgive you. As I spoke, my brother-in-law called someone into the conference room, and a man in a black suit entered. He sat on our sofa and stared intently at my in-laws. We're going to thoroughly strip you of your assets. What? In a daze, my mother-in-law let out a bewildered cry. This gentleman is the lawyer my brother-in-law hired for me. He's a well-known sharp lawyer in our firm, almost like a mentor to me. Including all the injustices you've inflicted, we're going to demand compensation. What? That's too late. How many months do you think have passed since then? Time doesn't matter here. The lawyer interjected, adjusting his glasses and fixing them with a sharp gaze. Based on the physical evidence at the time, and our reasons for wanting to claim compensation, it is possible to make a claim. As far as this case is concerned, there was no agreement made at the time of divorce to refrain from claiming money. Therefore, there is no specific deadline to file a claim, making it possible to pursue compensation. Furthermore, the lawyer then pulled an SSD from his pocket, leaving my in-laws blinking in confusion. What's that? This is a record of all the abuses your family has committed against Gina, stored as data from the camera attached to her PC for remote meetings. Upon learning this, my in-laws' faces turned pale. Gina often worked in the living room, where modern laptops typically have built-in cameras. You unknowingly harassed her there, which has now turned against you. The lawyer promptly put the SSD back into his pocket and continued with a cold look. The property has already been transferred back to Gina's name. Your eviction is only a matter of time. We will arrange for legal action soon. Please prepare the money. Wait a minute. You changed the title. John's reaction, almost reflexive, was immediately addressed by my brother-in-law. I told Gina to transfer the title to her. Thanks to you changing it to Sandra without asking, We were able to make the switch smoothly. Do you have any complaints about that? As my brother-in-law confronted him with a menacing smile. John, who had never won a fight against him since they were kids, couldn't muster a response. My mother-in-law, too, remained silent. We'll also be billing you for the expenses incurred from the transfer. It's only right since you caused this mess. We have to clean up the seeds you sowed. With arms crossed and standing authoritatively, my brother-in-law expressed his stern opinion. And neither of them could say a word in response. He had already informed Sandra in the same manner. And he had told me over the phone that he planned to divorce her once everything settled down. Despite not knowing anything, I'm terribly sorry for involving you in this mess, he said. I'll support you with all I can to make things right for you. Just tell me what you need. It's my family that did this, and I bear some responsibility too. If my brother-in-law hadn't reached out to me that day when I was packing, I might not have been able to do anything. I might still be suffering alone. Being part of that side, if I had no one to rely on, I couldn't have recovered like this. I never realized how much having even one person to support me could give me strength. I glared at the two of them, grateful for my brother-in-law's kindness and warmth, and delivered my final blow. I will never forgive you for using my and my father's emotions to fatten your own bliss. No matter how much you try to atone, I have no intention of forgiving you. If you come to the company again, I will definitely call the police. From now on, handle everything through my lawyer here. Do not appear before me ever again. Thanks to the president and my colleagues, who stayed as witnesses to the entire conversation. My in-laws had no way to escape blame. Shortly after, John and his parents moved out of the house. Considering the house they made me buy, the marriage arranged for that purpose, and the mental and physical suffering since the marriage, I really wanted to squeeze more out of them, he grumbled, feeling it was insufficient. But the lawyer and I agreed this was realistic, so that was all we could get. I shook my head, indicating that was incredible. Normally, even severe cases of psychological abuse fetch around $30,000. Considering the compounded offenses, the amount extracted was well above the norm. I was nothing but grateful. The house returned to my possession within a few days. It seemed my brother-in-law supervised the removal of furniture and appliances, and I was able to retrieve everything successfully. I am now offering the place as a rental property. It's still too large for me to live in, and being well located and barrier-free, it seemed wasteful to leave it unused. Following advice from my brother-in-law, I decided to rent it out. As per his declaration, Sandra is living a restricted life until she repays her debt. She is forced to work from morning till night. And my mother-in-law and John are in the same condition. My father-in-law couldn't participate due to his disability, but his pension is being garnished to pay off the debts. And it seems they are all living a hellish life. I felt relieved to know I could rely on my brother-in-law. Years have passed since then. I continue to work diligently as a lawyer. Thanks to my brother-in-law, the monthly payments have been made without fail, and the debt is expected to be fully paid off the year after next. Despite having thought about ending my life numerous times during those hellish times, I persevered, and as they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I live my days grateful for each one.